Can a white line define the fate of a legend like Hamilton? Or are we facing the clearest symbol of how F1 has changed forever? The 2025 Belgium Grand Prix promised to be a moment of redemption for Lewis Hamilton. In his new stage with Ferrari, he had shown flashes of adaptation and ambition, seeking to recapture the glory that has characterized him for almost 2 decades in the elite of motoring. Spa-Francorchamps, with its mythical legacy, was the ideal setting. A track that, for many pilots, represents the perfect balance between speed, technique, and courage. There, in a classification session that was anticipated by the changing climatic conditions, Hamilton was determined to mark territory. In her return launch during the Q1, Hamilton executed a first and second sector clean, aggressive, and with a fluidity that seemed to indicate a competitive rebirth. It's traced by Eau Rouge and Radelen. The fastest and more dangerous section of the circuit was precise, with the car absorbing each compression of the Belgian asphalt and showing that the SF25 could respond to the limit. That return was positioned by 7th, a solid square that guaranteed its passage to the Q2. However, that apparent consolidation soon crumbled. While Hamilton returned to boxes with signals of optimism, the track commissioners announced an investigation for possible infraction in the track limits just at turn 4, Radelen's exit. In a few minutes, the decision was issued: annulled. The reason, according to the technical report, the 4 wheels of the Ferrari had completely crossed the white line that defines the outer limit of the track. The evidence used for cancellation was not taken from the onboard chamber as usual, but from external, more distant, but more conclusive angles. The image showed the displaced Hamilton car scarce centimeters beyond the allowed layout. That fraction of distance, invisible to the human eye during driving at more than 280 km/h, was enough to invalidate all its return. It did not matter that most pilots take that curve similarly. It did not matter that this line of traced was on the border between the legal and what is necessary to maintain speed. Nor did it matter that the return time does not seem to benefit substantially. The sanction was unappealable. The impact was devastating. Hamilton descended to the 16th position, being out for 31 thousandths in front of Gabriel Bortolito, a microscopic difference that changed the history of the weekend. For a pilot who had been classifying within the top 10 constantly, this elimination in Q1 not only represented a sports barrier, but a symbolic blow. The image of one of the great names of modern motoring being discarded by an almost imperceptible infraction exposed crudely how sport has transformed its way of judging. Emotional, the coup was also visible. Hamilton, when getting off the car, kept his composure, but his subsequent statements were revealing. He described the moment as frustrating, explaining that, "We all take that curve," pointing to the normalization of that traced inside the paddock. His phrase lacked more than simple discontent. It was a direct criticism of the regulation, its rigid application, and the abandonment of the sports context. A lament not for having made a mistake, but for being a victim of a rule that seemed misaligned with the spirit of the competition. What was lived in Spa was not simply a return erased by the commissioners. It was a demonstration of how the obsessive search for millimeter legality can transform a moment of sports brilliance into a lapidary sanction. At that moment, Hamilton ceased to be a contender for pole. It became another example of the hardest and technical side of the modern F1. And so, SPA 2025 was marked by an annulment that, more than controversy, was the perfect photography of the contrast between the technical precision and the essence of pure piloting. The penalty to Lewis Hamilton in Spa-Francorchamps lit a discussion that goes far beyond the individual case. He puts on the table a structural conflict in modern Formula One, the use of technology to control surgical precision, in the face of the intuitive nature of piloting in extreme situations. This dilemma is not new, but the episode in the Radelen serves as a catalyst to review it with a new light. From the technical point of view, the regulations are clear. Every part of the car must be maintained within the limits marked by the white line. In theory, this is a simple rule designed to ensure equality and prevent pilots from getting advantage leaving the track. However, in practice, gray land full of nuances and contradictions has become. Because not all circuits are designed in the same way, or all track exit points suppose the same benefit. What in Paul Ricard can mean a half-second gain, in SPA can simply be a way to survive a curve taken thoroughly with a car to the adhesion limit. Radelen is possibly the most iconic and critical curve in this regard. It is a sequence where the car is compressed by vertical G-forces, where visibility is reduced, and where any minimum variation in the car balance can trigger a catastrophic track outlet. It is not a curve in which pilots attack looking for a direct gain, but a point of commitment, adaptation to changing conditions, risk management. Hamilton's trace, and ideal to that used by many during the session, did not offer a tangible benefit in terms of return time. In fact, studies conducted in previous years on that same section have shown that when leaving millimetrically beyond the white line, no advantage is obtained, and in many cases the speed for the next sector is compromised. The contradiction is how the regulation is applied without taking into account this context. In Spa, the monitoring of the track limits was carried out with external cameras, often placed several meters high and at angles that distort the real perception of contact with the line. FIA itself has admitted on other occasions that the technology available, although it requires, does not always capture the intention or dynamics of the car. The absence of sensors in certain areas or the use of frozen images as a basis for critical decisions ends up reducing an extremely complex discipline to a binary judgment, inside or outside. But the paradox does not end there. In other races of the same calendar, track limits infractions are judged with much more lax criteria. Some circuits allow pilots to use pianos, astroturf or paved areas without any sanction, even when it is clear that an advantage is obtained in doing so. This inconsistency feeds a perception of arbitrariness that erodes the credibility of the system. Pilots, engineers and fans begin to wonder if sports justice in F1 has become more dependent on technology than expert judgment. In the case of Hamilton, the problem was not just that he crossed a line. The real conflict is that this line becomes an invisible trap in the context of a curve where survival is often more important than perfection. And yet, that same rule that was presented as an equity tool ended up being the factor that eliminated one of the most experienced sport pilots by just a couple of centimeters. The consequence is a sport where technology is imposed on logic, and where the pilot, the human component, which makes possible the magic of Formula One, is relegated to a pixelated figure on a review screen. This act, more than a technical analysis, is a mirror, a reflection of how F1 is dealing with its evolution. And while precision is vital for sports security and professionalism, it also becomes urgent to rethink how that precision is applied so that it does not end up killing the essence of motor racing, human talent facing the limit. The cancellation of the Lewis Hamilton classification return in the Belgian GP not only altered the order of the grille, but also generated a series of deep impacts that extended at multiple levels. In sports, the coup was immediate. Hamilton was relegated to the 16th exit position, being forced to face the Grand Prix from a position that is not conditioned with his expectations or with the real performance of his car in that batch. The data that encapsulates everything, just 31 thousandths separated him from the pass to Q2. An insignificant difference in any other context, but that marked the line between continuing to compete for the first positions or fall to the bottom of the classification. From the strategic point of view, this sanction forced Ferrari to completely rethink the weekend approach. A car that was designed to play cutting positions was suddenly condemned to running between traffic, compromising career rhythm, tire management and accident risk. Under normal conditions with a good classification, Hamilton would have had room to play with strategies, choose less congested stop windows and fight for important points. But starting so back, even a competitive car becomes hostage from the middle platoon chaos. Emotional, the impact was much more than a momentary disappointment. For a pilot like Hamilton, with more than 300 large awards and 7 world titles, be eliminated in Q1. What happened in Spa with Hamilton is, in that sense, a microcosm of the modern conflict of F1. A sport that seeks to be more fair, more transparent, more rigorous, but that in that search can end up dehumanizing. When a pilot loses a return due to a millimeter infraction without objective advantage, sport runs the risk of becoming less about races and more on processes. Less about talent and more about technocracy. And if that continues, then Spa 2025 will not be remembered only as the race where Hamilton was eliminated in Q1. It will be remembered as the point where Formula One stopped rewarding excellence to punish imperfection. And in that transit, something essential of the spirit of motoring can be left behind. A sanction, a result, a white line, and the cost of forgetting why millions love this sport first. The decision to cancel Lewis Hamilton's return in the 2025 Belgium Grand Prix might seem, at first glance, a simple application of the regulation. But when looking at her more detail, she becomes an alert signal. A silent warning about the direction that is taking Formula One. In an era where the margins are so narrow that a tenth can separate the podium from irrelevance, the punishment for an infraction of a few centimeters forces us to ask ourselves, what are we prioritizing as sport? Hamilton was not penalized by a reckless maneuver. He did not win time. He did not push another pilot out. He did not risk anyone's security. Its infraction was a formality, a matter of millimeters, trapped by a camera that does not understand the context or the purpose of its draw. And yet, It was enough to sentence their participation in one of the most legendary clues of the calendar.